Instead of, because if I put the banner in, it's cutting you off, Tim. So what I'll do is um, I'll pop the banners up, and then I'll take them back down briefly after you go through it. So we're starting on the 6th. We're going through the 10th of August, and I just outlined all of those transits. So I don't even think I need to put the banners back up. You just tell us what you think about it, Tim.
All right, fantastic. Well, I think Bianca said you gave the perfect kind of introduction to this when you said Venus invited us to kind of take a look inside and like maybe reassess some things. I think Mars is going to come in and make that a little bit more radical if we didn't take that look. So I think we'll go ahead and start with Wednesday, August 6th. Mars enters Libra, enters his detriment. That's crazy. He's as far as away as he can be from Aries. Like this is completely not his comfort zone, right? Mars is action, will, drive, what I want, my agenda, like really pushing something forward. And we're talking about Mars entering the masculine cardinal air temple of Venus. What does Venus want? She wants relationships, diplomacy. She wants fairness, equality. She wants beauty, objective beauty, but beauty nonetheless, right? And one of the things, though, that I think is really fascinating, I'm going to kind of flesh it out a little bit, but with Mars going into Libra, Libra is an interesting sign for me. It's something that I feel like understanding Taurus and Venus's connection is like, oh, that's easy. You know, everything's burgeoning, flourishing, growth, green, beauty. Oh, I get it. Libra's a little bit different. But when I add in the layer that that is the house of Saturn's exaltation, oh, here we go. Like that added so many layers of definition. Saturn wants to bring boundaries. He wants to bring structure to things, right? And so when we're talking about things necessarily of like beauty, relationships, how do we bring structure to those things? Well, we can put laws in place, we can put contracts in place with business. So we have to use relational means in order for Mars to really try to get his agenda through and across, right? Mars don't like that. He wants to just be violent, attack, conquer,
No.
achieve whatever he's after. So being in that detriment, he has to think a little bit differently and try to use some of the tools, the Libran tools, using his charm, trying to use wit. I think part of the interesting thing too is that Mars can be manipulative, right? Again, it's what I want to get. And if I have to use diplomacy, wit, and charm, no one says that I have to have necessarily integrity behind that. I'm Mars. I want to get this done. And if I have to use people or go through people or go through contracts or forcibly, you know, maybe on the surface it looks like a healthy contract, but I want to get what I want out of this at the bottom line. So, what I also think is fascinating is because Mars is in the exaltation of Saturn, and Saturn is opposing, which I'll talk about a little bit later, and Saturn will be opposing. Mars, when he first enters Libra, he's actually in the bound of Saturn. So even though Saturn's going to be in his detriment in Aries, and he's going to be making an opposition, Saturn has quite a bit to say about Mars going into Libra and wanting to push forward this agenda. Saturn's right there. And then Venus being Cancer lending, like Mars may get a little bit frustrated, really trying to wield that sword. Again, too, because Libra is very, I think of the Queen of Swords in the Tarot. She's, you know, it's an air sign. She's above this. She's calm. She's holding the sword straight up. It's like no BS. We're not going to make hard, off the wall decisions. All of this has to be strategically, clearly thought out so that it's fair and balanced and equal. And so when you think of the warrior coming to see the queen who's telling him like, no, we need a strategy, like that just is not, that's difficult. So some of the delineations that I think that we may see come up or that may really present themselves are like obviously forcefully trying to push a contract, an idea, or an agenda. It could be a social construct. It could be challenging maybe current laws or ways that things, relationships are currently operating. It could be also, I mean, Libra is, you know, the natural ruler, I guess, of the seventh house of partnerships and relationships. So maybe that's an ally turned into an enemy, or maybe Mars, if that's signifying you, depending on whatever chart, maybe that means that you somewhat turn into an enemy, right? And there are other aspects, like when we're going to have this Uranus trine, that could completely spark that fuse to like, you found out some information, and oh boy, that changes things a lot. Um, so also for Mars and Libra, another really good thing too is using words and logic, using the tools of Venus and Saturn and wit to get your agenda across. So using that words and logic as your sword of power, so to speak, as your weapon of choice to get across. So again, manipulations and even sometimes overextending, maybe some uh, energy mentally, running around in circles trying to, it could be completely contradictory to what you want because you're trying to manipulate people to get what you want because what you truly want maybe isn't really good for them. It's not good for
That fucking guy,
the other
man. Every
party,
fucking
but
guy.
that's of no concern to Mars. He's not concerned about the other party, which is why he struggles here the most. Um, so one of the I like to I like to use imagery and I like to use characters from like all kind or like personal references to highlight things. And one of the references that I think that I kind of came up with for for this is Littlefinger in Game of Thrones. I feel like his literal superpower was he had little birds that would go around like collect secrets, like learn all these things, and he would literally use that to blackmail people. He'd use it to move people in positions of power to follow his love. Um, he was often seen as somewhat of a diplomat, but at the same time, he was terrorizing a lot of people behind the scenes, using his charm, using his connections to get through that. So
Fucking guy,
um,
man. Every fucking guy,
that
man.
that's not necessarily the most probably the most expressive place for Mars to be able to fight because it's quite hidden, but it can be really effective. And I would say Littlefinger is probably one of the more successful um, integrated attempts, but we saw how that ended for him. So um, I would say that it's a tough struggle. It's a tough struggle with Mars going in that direction. So now we've got Mars already kind of hindered. He's got to deal with these relationships and structures and things that boundaries that are kind of in his way. On August 8th, now we're getting a trine from Uranus. All right. So what is Uranus? He's shocking. It's unpredictable. More importantly to me, what I think Uranus really represents is progress and just simply the unexpected. Um, Uranus went into Gemini, my first house, something that, as a fellow air sign, I was just super, super excited about. But what I found Uranus to bring me is really this underlying buzz, and it it's like a humming that's constantly there. It's almost like a restlessness, but it's not the Sagittarian restlessness of like, let's go out and explore. It's this level of like, not uncomfortability, but there's always something buzzing, or there's always something there that you can either pivot to, or change, or think about, or you're always on the cusp of something just completely shifting the way that you think, or shifting the way that my body is actually has become quite unpredictable. Some days I'm full of energy, like today I'm like, let's go. The other day I barely could get out of bed. So I think that Uranus, for good or for bad, regardless, is going to ignite Mars. Mars I see is the bomb. He's ready to go, just whatever, explode. Uranus is like, I would say like a static fuse. Like, sure, it's lightning and it's big and boom, but like a static fuse exploding a bomb, like that's something that's completely unpredictable. That's You would have had no idea where, how, when, or how, but it's just that little boom shot that allows Mars to go boom and amplify. So that's a really that could be a loud combination. So with Uranus being in Gemini sign,
Absolutely
we're
insane.
talking about communication, technology. Um, we're talking about new ways of
Wow.
interacting, travel. Um, so could it be, and
That's
trines
22.
are
It's
the
gotta
nature
be.
of Jupiter, so
What?
something that's supporting Mars or whatever
Oh.
Mars' agenda in his detriment. So Could it be that maybe there's potentially some new technology, or maybe there's some information that comes out that helps Mars to push his agenda forward, and whether he wants to do contracts or whether he wants to charm someone? Maybe there's a piece of information that he can use to manipulate, or maybe there is um, an increase in some negotiations or contracts based on some new technology that was discovered. Maybe it's, automatic, crazy, some sort of drones that were like, oh, we don't want to go to war with those, so let's make a contract, let's negotiate something so that doesn't go there. It also could mean that just simply, yeah, more information could lead to like war reconciliation. Um, Also, though, Uranus trining Mars is like kind of like, and especially with Uranus and Gemini, could be like a chaotic love of technology as well. Kind of a disregard maybe for, well, when I see Mars in like Libra, it could be like laws, regulations, and like pushing ahead. Maybe something new or novel pops up, and that supports pushing ahead with maybe not putting in necessarily the laws or structures that are in place. But I see that that's like a love of like this chaos, and maybe using those things to fight. And also that Uranus could be sending Mars literally technology tools to use to fight the Libran war, or to use to better those relationships, or to use as an arsenal to force or get his agenda across, whatever that is. Literally could be using brand new technologies. Um, Something that I kind of think about, like when I started delineating and like putting this story together, the next thing that came up was kind of like the Matrix, and like Neo, kind of like this weird techno warrior type, um, like being, fed like truths and technology that helps him to kind of like break through and fight like this war. So I think something of that nature, something that we could use in like the arsenal to get his point across. Okay. So all of that.
Oh, my
So we've got
third
all of
time
that
really
going
fucking
on, and then
sucks,
on
man.
August 8th, not even the same day as we're trining Uranus, we've got. I'm going to talk about these two in tandem, because like talking about them separate is quite a bit. We've got Mars opposing both Saturn and Neptune. Saturn and Neptune both are witch retrograde. They are both in Aries, which is super fascinating. So I'll start with Saturn, because Saturn is our big, cold, slow, karmic, heavy blockage guy. Plus, Mars is in his exaltation. Plus, Mars is actually beginning, he's in the bound of Saturn. So, again, Saturn has something to say here. Um, with Saturn being in Aries, Saturn wants to take his time. He's hesitant, second guessing, kind of like, let's put some structures in place. Mars is putting pressure on Saturn to get this done, whatever this is, whatever his agenda is. The interesting thing about it is Saturn is retrograde. So those significations, the cold, slow, delays, heavy losses, those are a little bit more internalized at this point. And with him conjoined Neptune, I would say the retrogradation of Saturn makes things, from my experience, whatever we've built as far as structures or foundations, or what we have as a solid foundation. When Saturn goes retrograde, the things that don't work start falling apart, and it's like the test of time. I tell people Saturn to me is like the professor, and like when he's direct, you're going through your trials, you're trying to figure all this stuff out, and then when he's like retrograde, it's like quiz time. Like whatever you actually learned, whatever's actually working, will stay. The rest of it is going to fall away. And so when we couple that with what's falling away, with Neptune conjoined him, and Neptune's retrograde as well. So Neptune, we know, illusions, apparitions, spirituality, can be, delusions. The image I like to think about Neptune is, I don't know if you guys, this is probably me dating myself, whatever. There's a perfume commercial, Britney Spears. She's running through like this enchanted forest or something, and you're like, oh, it's so pretty. Like there's all these like lights and fireflies, and it's just like this dark enchanted with all these cool colors. And it's like, that would be so fun to be there, but no one stopped to think like, hey, there's nothing in the forest that would light up red and blue. Like, what is that? Like, what? Like, I like living in this little thing, but like, I don't really know. I'm not asking a lot of questions. That's how I think Neptune is. I'm not asking a lot of questions. I just like it. And so I'm going to stay here. But when he goes retrograde, it's like now that comes internal. And so it's like, I feel like the lights kind of turn on, right? Slowly. And you're like, that was a lot prettier before I started. What happened? And so now it comes reflective. And I think it becomes like the spiritual reflection of like, eek, there's some guilt there. Maybe that wasn't it, or maybe that wasn't what I was seeing or what I was necessarily thinking. Because when I have Mars opposite Neptune, naturally, I believe I see more of like the spiritual warrior. Um, I'm ready to go fight a war because I believe in something. Has no idea if it's right or wrong or if it's grounded in facts. None of that. It's I believe I'm spiritually fighting for something. These are my beliefs. But when Neptune is retrograde, I feel like I'm fighting, but like, is that the only way? Is like, could there be something else? And so again, like the fog kind of lifts, and you're like, was that the best like thing? Um, so that Mars opposing Neptune, just like my imagery is, I think of an army, like an army vet turned like protester, right? Like went out, yeah, believe it, like let's go fight the war, we gotta do this, and then coming back in the retro, like it's over, and then the Neptune is like, mm, maybe there's another, maybe peace could be a better way, right? And I think kind of lifting up some of that stuff. So anyway, with Mars opposite Saturn and Neptune, I consider Saturn and Neptune retrograde together. Saturn's dropping everything. Neptune's like, this is clear. It's like things are falling apart. It's like a hyper clarity. So we have kind of like this hyper clarity dynamic in the house of Mars of like whatever Mars is trying to push, it's like, whoa, that whatever's not working, and I see what's going on. I don't know how I feel about all of this kind of stuff. And with Mars shooting that ray, there's pressure, but again, he's still under the gas. A little bit of Saturn too. So, what does all of that even mean? That means some delineations that I have is like, instead of Mars, it could be going back to what Bianca said. That invite again to take a look internally is like, am I really doing, or am I really the person? Was that an illusion? Was I behaving in a way that wasn't natural to who I was? Are these foundations that we've set up in the areas of Mars, are these really real long-term goals and foundations for us? Like reassessing the image, reassessing the vision, right? Because Neptune is visionaries and he's retrograde. So reassessing the foundation of the vision, does that make a lot of sense to us, right? And with Mars being in Libra, maybe that's a collective vision. Maybe that's the vision of social contracts and how the laws are being enforced, or businesses or whatever is being enforced. So it's really taking a look, and that's kind of that's heavy. That's Mars is really at play here. The kind of interesting thing is about this narrative is then August 9th, we go into a full moon in Aquarius. What is a full moon? It is a culmination of a cycle, right? Aquarius, fixed air sign, ruled by Saturn. Detachment, the foreigner, the observer, innovation, futurism. We know what the moon is: caring, love, nurturing, home, emotions. It's watery, reflective, passive. Also, sometimes represents the people. Um, and so we got a full moon in Aquarius, which is like the moon is full of energy, full of light, and the home of the foreigner, the observer, the outside. What does that mean? How can that usually be translated? I have a moon in Aquarius, and what I can tell you is very much the observer, very much an objective kind of view of reality, very easy to take objective takes on your feelings, to then kind of judge and or determine, should I feel sad or should I not? Typically, the first thing you're doing is you're not crying. You're trying to observe and intellectualize to an extent what's going on. So as we've got that full moon there, I mean, some delineations are like, could be maybe either you or person or people feeling ostracized, right? And with the full moon, remember that sun is in Leo, so that sun is like ego leaders. It's like having a good time. It's like I'm shining, guys. And the moon is on the complete opposite. She's like, I'm not feeling this cold over here. Like I'm in a Saturn sign. It just feels so disconnected. We have to reconcile how we feel, coming to a culmination standpoint about how we feel. And so this last part, after we have this mental or like cognitive emotional awakening of objectivity in Aquarius on the 9th, we go straight into August 10th, which is Mars trine Pluto in Aquarius. Pluto, death, control, subconscious. Simply what I'm getting is like Mars gets frustrated, right? That moon goes in Aquarius. Last time it was in Aquarius really quickly was the DNC in Chicago, as well as there was the stop the what is it? It's not stop the steal. There is it was an Israeli. They did a protest outside of the DNC. And I thought that summed up the opposition perfectly. The leaders are inside, yeah, we're having a big, great convention, and the people are outside saying, no, 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 that's not, you need to stop fighting Israel. Again, this Mars trine Pluto, really quickly, I want to finish this up. It's going to give Mars a nuclear type of ability on August 10th. So the people may not like what's necessarily going on with the leadership. Pluto then gives Mars a little bit of power, and Pluto's retrograde, so it's going to be internal. So I can see some delineations: obsession with power, obsession with pushing that agenda in Libra, obsession with fighting or using these particular Libran charm, wit, manipulative tactics to really bring forth Mars's agenda. So Mars is super busy this month. Thank goodness we've got Venus and Jupiter in Cancer doing some magic, but he's very, very, very busy.
Hmm. Yeah, we're going to be spending quite a bit of time on this sequence with content this month on the channel. So for those of you who are looking at this now and feeling a bit overwhelmed by the whole sequence, breaking it down little by little, one transit at a time, will be a big task for us this month, but something we're definitely going to be doing. So I think one thing that I would say is that when Mars goes through a sequence like this, and you've got some really nice, kind of a grand air trine going on, but then a heated opposition, obviously in the middle of it between Mars, Saturn, and Neptune, I think it could be a testing moment for different or new or emerging ideas or paradigms. You think about that grand air trine, I think a lot about the innovative ideas that come from air trines like that. Uranus, obviously, in Gemini is very innovative. Pluto in Aquarius, big picture thinking. Mars in Libra comes in and is like, well, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but I've got a few ideas or plans. Or maybe these are ideas coming through, and like Tim was talking about with Mars and its detriment in Libra, maybe Mars is going to try to make things look as nice, and there's going to be a diplomatic underhandedness, like, oh, this is good for you, trust me, this is a great thing, Mars and Libra will just do whatever it takes to get what it wants done and try to make things look better than maybe they are, or will use diplomacy to just work its own agenda. But whatever the case may be, something's being tested. There's a kind of inflection point in the month of August here for Mars, where I think ideas, thoughts, communication, technology are running up against some reality check or some kind of resistant feedback. And how Mars works through that oppositional tension is going to be a really interesting part of the month. So thank you, Tim, for breaking that down for us so nicely. The full moon in Aquarius, right in the middle of it, does, I think, speak to a collective voicing. And so I wouldn't be surprised if during this period of time we see real expressions of this Mars energy within groups, collectives, communities. That's really pretty consistent with the full moons in Aquarius. I think you're right about that. Well, let's move on to our next section. Courtney's going to be taking us through a few very interesting pieces of August. On August 11th, Mercury turns direct, finally. On the 12th, Venus conjoins Jupiter. Isn't that interesting that Mercury is appearing as a morning star, and Venus and Jupiter, the benefics, are conjoining together in Cancer? It's really kind of a interesting, I feel like, auspicious little sequence to follow an intense Mars period. So I like that. I like that the benefics are sort of hugging it out. We've got, following this, on the 23rd, we jump forward a little bit. There's a little bit of a quiet period from the 12th to the 23rd. We get a new moon in Virgo, officially taking us into the eclipse season. And then on the 24th, the sun will square Uranus. So Courtney's going to take us through this piece of the month and tell us her thoughts on the astrology here.
Yeah, so on August 11th, we've got Mercury stationing direct, and this signifies an end point for whatever reviews, revisions, or reversals was happening during the period of Mercury's retrograde. This stationing moment, we might see